The American justice system now is on trial with this case. Potential jurors have already said they were too scared to be on the jury. There's a terrible threat of violence out there, which is why the lawyers in this case are speaking behind bulletproof glass. Can you imagine that? Would anyone, given all this, dare to consider both sides of the argument, which is precisely when we most must? 12 Angry Men, To Kill a Mockingbird. Here's the prosecutor overnight.
You will learn that on May 25th of 2020, Mr. Derek Chauvin betrayed this badge when he used excessive and unreasonable force upon the body of Mr. George Floyd, that he put his knees upon his neck and his back, grinding and crushing him until the very breath, no, ladies and gentlemen, until the very life were squeezed out of him.
And here now is the defence.
Common sense tells you that there are always two sides to a story. The evidence will show that when confronted by police, Mr. Floyd put drugs in his mouth in an effort to conceal them from the police. Dr. Baker found none of what are referred to as the telltale signs of asphyxiation. There were no bruises to Mr. Floyd's neck, either on his skin or after peeling his skin back to the muscles. The evidence will show that Mr. Floyd died of a cardiac arrhythmia that occurred as a result of hypertension, his coronary disease, the ingestion of methamphetamine and fentanyl, and the adrenaline flowing through his body, all of which acted to further compromise an already compromised heart.
I was joined earlier by Sky News US correspondent Annelise Nielsen. Annelise Nielsen, thanks for joining me. How big is this trial in the United States?
Andrew, this has had wall-to-wall coverage. It's been live streamed on local news networks as well as national news networks. Everyone is waiting for the outcome of this trial because it's going to define what's been such a disruptive issue in the United States over the last year. The killing of George Floyd has been so influential in the Black Lives Matter movement, and even around Minneapolis you can see that so many of the businesses have boarded up. There's the anticipation that there will be further violence and looting if Derek Chauvin's found not guilty. So this is why this is such an important trial, and even you can see behind me the court building has had to be fortified with fencing that you can't possibly climb over. There's a very small presence of National Guard, but there's a much bigger presence on standby because they are really worried about this. And what the concern is that there won't be a resolution. Even if the jury is hung, there's going to be this ongoing discussion, and tensions are really high. And so this was a really important day in this trial, the opening arguments, and playing that full 9-minute video showing George Floyd dying on that Minneapolis street corner set the tone for what's going to be an extremely emotive trial.
Now, you mentioned that the court is barricaded. We've seen bulletproof glass inside to protect the lawyers. Tell us more about outside the court. What are you seeing there?
There was a big contingent of protesters today. They were loud but fairly orderly going around. It was more for social media content, a lot of it, but also to make their presence felt here outside the court, though they notably didn't gather until after the trial had ended. We've spent some time at George Floyd Square as well, the area around where he died, which has now been shut off. There's ongoing discussion about the fact that that's impacting a lot of local businesses. At the same time, the protesters who've been gathering there for the last 10 months, even staying through winter, have said that it's an important statement to make. But it was really important to speak to some of the local residents. We spoke to a pastor who was at the church diagonally opposite from Cup Foods the day George Floyd was killed. He's been in the community for almost 40 years as the pastor, and he provided really interesting perspective. They want to see cultural change. They think the relationship with the police force is broken down, and there isn't that respect for African Americans, that they're more likely to be targeted. But at the same time, he said that they want to move forward and they don't support the idea of defunding the police.
Oh, no. We're not anti-police.
No. So
we
support defund the police? Is that?
No, not at all. We want the police to be responsible for serving and protecting the community. we're supposed to have a being relationship with the police department, are supposed to be in relationship with the community, or vice versa. And that relationship has been violated.
Annelise, that's very sobering. Of course, immediately after George Floyd died, the Minneapolis Council voted to defund the police in a very controversial move, and there have been changes made to the police, but violence has gone up.
Well, even around that area, there's been a number of shootings. There's been an increase in gang violence. We've heard from the people living there, and there was a man shot dead again outside of Cup Foods. And so the question really is about what the solution is from here. And this is where the BLM message often gets very muddled. You have the opponents of it saying that they want to defund the police and have anarchy. You have some of the supporters really almost saying the same thing, but a lot of the people caught in the middle ground saying, look, we just don't want to increase police funding. We want at the same time to be investing in those social services, so when someone's having a mental health breakdown, that we don't have a police officer coming out with their weapons drawn immediately to resolve the issue, when you could have someone talk them down and put them into a facility where they get treatment for that. And a lot of people in very reasonable ways have been caught out in this argument. The local business owners have said that their income is down 75% since the George Floyd death, and in that time the COVID pandemic's hit as well, so they're really struggling to hang on. And the people living there are saying, we can't get food delivery drivers to our homes, we can't get an ambulance when we need them, we can't get a taxi or an Uber, we're just in this no man's land. And everyone kind of on the extreme isn't wanting to wade into it because it is so contentious. At the same time, around that area, the protesters have demanded 24 different demands before they agree to let people back in again, and some of them are really quite difficult to achieve, and there is that group that will resist that. So it's a very contentious time, but a lot of the people I spoke to too have said that they're happy the discussion's happening because they've been feeling this way for a long time, and so even if it does take a while, if they do get to some resolution that's better than what they had before, that's all progress.
Well, I wonder whether it will be progress. It seems all very gloomy at the moment, and I think the only way there will be less violence is if Chauvin is found guilty, correct?
Look, it's going to be contentious whichever way it goes. There are protesters who I think are ready to make some trouble if there is a not guilty verdict. The best chance they have of conviction is the fact that there is this manslaughter charge that's been added. That wasn't almost the case, but that is the lowest bar to cross, and it psychologically puts the option in the juror's mind to say, look, even if you believe in reasonable force of a police officer, you can still say that from his behaviour he should have reasonably known that death was an outcome, and it gives them that option. That's why the defence really fought against this being added in. But again, in a jury trial, you need a unanimous verdict to convict. There's 14 jurors there, 2 alternates, so it could really come down to the wire. But that video being played at the beginning was quite definitive in putting in the mind of many of jurors, you'd assume, about the severity, the gravity of the decision they have to make.
Annelise Nielsen, thank you so much for your time.